Okay, so we're going to look at the shaky camera. Sorry about that. Look at the evidence surrounding Rishi Sunak. So these are just, and I do suggest you do your own research. You can look at, verify and corroborate all of this information. These are screenshots taken from news articles, but also Wikipedia. But importantly, that then helps lead to the main evidence, which is in the Companies House registration system and the legal incorporate, or let's say incorporation documents attached to those registers. So you can verify all of this and you'll see that all of this is true. So starting off with these articles, these are fairly recent articles from February this year, 2024. We're now in May, just about. And you'll see that Infosys is linked to various articles. That is, according to these articles, a company linked to Rishi Sunak's family. Okay, so there's a close affiliation to this company and Rishi Sunak. So we'll scroll through. This is just showing you examples. There's also a connection through to Israel, according to this, to Rishi Sunak. So now we're going to look at the Companies House registry system on the right here. Now, when you get this and look at this on your screen, and you can do this, go and type in Google, for example, Companies House search, and it'll bring you up to a search screen. You can type in this company name, and it'll bring up this screen, and you'll get these various tabs. And you've got an overview tab, filing history, people. These are the main three that you need to look at in relation to this, and this is the overview screen here. Okay, so we're looking at the overview. If you go into the people tab, so I'm now within the people tab. And you can tell that we're within the same company because it's got it at the top here, and we're now looking at this person record. And if you click on this person, it then takes you to their company. So they have a financial interest, obviously, through any companies that they're linked to. So now we're looking at Infosys BPM Limited. And the first thing I'd like to point out about this company, Infosys BPM Limited, is when you scroll down on the overview page, okay, so this will fill your screen. Remember, these are screenshots taken from it. You'll scroll down and you'll see previous names that they were registered as. Now, they have to be, any new change of name has to be registered, okay, on here. And it will be shown on this overview page. If it's not on this overview page, it hasn't been registered. Okay, so if we scroll down on this one, you'll see that this had a previous company name in 2003, which is when it was incorporated as Infosys BPO Limited. So all they've done is change one letter, Infosys BPM Limited. Now, that's a classic method of removing liability and accountability for any, for example, tax evasion or criminally obtained money through the companies. I'm not saying that's happened with this company. Bearing in mind this is a Prime Minister's affiliated company, all they've done is change one letter, change the name, and that then removes any liability or accountability from this company. And they've just changed one letter to do that. That means that money can be moved through accounts, whether it be laundered money, criminally attained, or through tax evasion. Now let's look at the incorporation document. Now, this is where later you'll see examples of where this is 100% fraud. In this case, there's a completely different company name on their incorporation documents. So if you go into the filing history, you'll be able to look at these documents and also the articles of association. You can see you've got a completely different company name. But in this case, and you can see there's a foreign language here. It's looks like it's been registered in another country because the dates don't match the register. Okay, so this isn't too much of an issue necessarily with fraud, but I'm just showing you an example of this. So if we move through, we're now looking within the same company. So Infosys, you can see at the top here, Limited. And we've got a bank, DBS Bank Limited. Okay, so we're now looking at DBS Bank Limited. And we can see it's an overseas company in Singapore. Okay, so straight immediately it gives the ability for tax evasion or paying no tax. It's got a completely different company name on the register than what on the incorporation document than what's been registered. Okay, but now we'll move forward. So this is where things get interested. So you can see that Infosys Limited here within another person record now, and we're looking at a company called International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation. They were incorporated. It's an overseas company again, and they were incorporated in May 2001. And that's potentially significant because it's 2 months before Larry Silverstein purchased the lease for the World Trade Center building, okay? He acquired the lease, the only person in the whole history of that building to acquire the lease in July 2001. As we know, the disaster happened in September 2001. Please look at my my World Trade Center document to see all of the information in relation to this. And all documents are contained now within a publicly accessible folder that is going to be within the description of most of my videos, or I can email them to you. My email address is garythetruthsetsusfree@gmail.com, and you can see all of these documents to have them in front of you. But interestingly, and this is important, the initial name for this company was called International Accounts Standards Committee Foundation. Now that's important because for this fraud to take place, you would need accountants to be part of it, because they file the company's accounts to Companies House. Now, if they have access to the fraudulent bank accounts or forged bank documents that I suspect many of them do, and I have those forged bank documents that I suspect are produced by the banks themselves, the accountants can then use them to falsify the figures to the companies, for the companies, and send the real money into offshore accounts, and we'll come to that later. So this is interesting because it's an international accounting standards committee, okay, foundation. So that suggests all accountants have an affiliation, or they have an affiliation to all accountants potentially. But importantly, looking on, so this is the incorporation document for that company. And you can see, we'll just pick on one company here because it's the first one on there, and they've been mentioned before in the other documents, Centrica PLC. Now, if there's any fraudulent activity on these incorporation documents, including a company that is a false entity, the illegality continues through to these companies and means they are also fraudulent and unlawful, because they're supposed to be legal documents and they're signed, and therefore if any part of it is illegal, then they're not legal documents. They're unlawful illegal documents. That means the company is unlawful and illegal and cannot or should not trade and operate. And of course, Companies House would be aware of this, and any legal teams and financial advisors should be aware of this as well. Now, Centrica PLC, also mentioned on here, is an address. I haven't circled that very well, highlighted it very well. It's Chancery Lane. Chancery features throughout, and you'll see that. So let's look at Centrica PLC, since it's mentioned on the document. Here is Centrica PLC, and you can see it was incorporated in 1995. So Centrica PLC, and I suggest you watch all of the videos in relation to Sunak, because it just gets more and more interesting all the way through, you will see. So Swift Incorporations Limited started up this company, and they are linked to Jordan's. That is a false entity company. It should never have been trading, because the fraud is through the creation of the company. Therefore, it's a government fraud, and the company should never have been operating in the first place. That makes them illegal, unlawful entities, which means they can't be held accountable or liable for anything at all, including criminal activity. And here we are, they've been allowed to do this. Now we're looking within DBS Bank again at this person. You can see Singapore Exchange Limited. Now on the incorporation documents for Singapore Exchange Limited, you have a company, Eversheds LLP. Now that's significant. If you look at my other videos and documents, Eversheds features throughout, and they also have false entity companies, fraudulently created companies, and of course Companies House are involved in it, a government organisation. Eversheds also links to police associated companies that you'll see with my other documents. Of course, the police would know about this. DBS Bank, now looking into this company, you can see they're linked to Sopra Steria UK Corporate Limited. Let's look at that company. Incorporated in 1971. And you can slow this down. And again, you can look at this document in slow time, because they're within the document file on the link. Now, this is interesting because it's got within the documents, it's got a company, Articles of Association with a company of F International Group PLC, with the date of 1986 on it. But on the register, it hasn't got that name, F International Group PLC, but it's 1986. So it's between these dates. So you've got a new Articles of Association in between the dates here. Normally when you have a company and it starts up, the Articles of Association are created at the beginning of that company. But here we go. Anyway, it gets much more interesting, trust me, and much more obvious that it's fraud. We've already had some elements, but let's go forward. So we're now within DBS Bank Limited again and looking through, and here we go. We've got this person links through to Barclays PLC. Now this is absolutely crucial evidence. because on their overview page, remember on the right, on the left here, you have the original name that this was incorporated under. You can see Barclays Bank PLC, 20th of July 1896. That's a very old company. Company's house was set up in 1844. So Barclays Bank PLC. So the incorporation documents must match that, but of course it doesn't. Barclay and Company Limited. Now that is a deliberate falsification of the register, and as we know, that is a bank. Okay, and this is closely affiliated with our own Prime Minister. And again, just to show you again, here's another document within the incorporation document, another page, sorry, within the incorporation document, and it's Barclay and Company Limited. So that is fraud. That is fraud because the dates match, according to the dates on the forms. They match the register, but the company is different. So they've made a deliberate alteration to change that. That then allows, under the Fraud Act, anything forgery of a legal document, which would include a public register, because it has legal implications, and the documents are legal as well, the incorporation documents, that causes a risk to anyone, a financial risk of loss to anyone, or an unlawful gain to those involved. The crime is complete. So even if there isn't a financial loss, just the fact that it creates a risk, the offence is complete and the crime is complete. And of course there is a risk, because if they're allowing illegal entities to continue to trade and do whatever they like and not be held accountable, that means that anyone that uses those companies are also at risk of financial loss, and there's a chance of a financial unlawful gain to those involved. So the offence is complete. So the fraud, the crime is there. So let's move forward. DBS Bank. So in there, it links to Singapore Airlines. Overseas company incorporated in 1998. DBS Bank linking through now to... Now this is important. I'm now in touch with groups in Canada. I've emailed 350 Canadian MPs on the back of that with the evidence, and you can see we're getting international links through to the fraud. Canada United Kingdom Council. Now that is a significant company. Let's look at them. Canada United Kingdom Council, incorporated in 1992. And just reading through, and you can see immediately on the incorporation document is Jordan's and Sons, and the same address that is featured throughout the fraud. Let's move forward. So linked through there to the same person, we've now got oil companies. Shell Response Limited. Oil and gas is key to this, and you'll see the incorporation company name. It should be this according to the register. 1913 was the creation. It should be Shell Company of Venezuela Limited, in brackets the. This is the incorporation document or certificate of incorporation. Venezuela Petroleum. There's no the at all. And in fact, it's completely different, isn't it? Look, Shell Company of Venezuela. And we've got Venezuela Petroleum Exploration Limited. Completely different. And the date, just to confirm here, that the date is even in writing and matches the register of 1913. This is fraud, my friends. Serious fraud. DBS Bank, we're now looking at another one now. Another person linked to Standard Chartered PLC. These are all public documents. There's nothing wrong with showing me showing these. Anyone can look at these. They should not be removed whatsoever. Okay, you can see Standard Chartered Bank Public Liability Company should be on the incorporation document. So that's Standard Chartered Bank Public Limited Company. You can see the date is 1969. It's not on there, look, it's completely different. Standard Chartered Banking Group. Completely different. Fraud. You also see an address here, Gresham Street. This features throughout the fraud, but they're changing the numbers. Okay, so they either own all these numbers in the streets and have them as a correspondence, or they're using it as false addresses to avoid accountability. I'll let you draw your own conclusions what that may be. Also at the bottom, it's important to note that you have the company Slaughter and May, and this address also features throughout the fraud. And Slaughter and May has a false illegal entity company as well. Sorry, some of the boxes have become misaligned. So now Black Horse. Now I've acquired what I suspect to be forged Lloyds bank documents through my company. You can see those. They're in the document file. You can go and look at a couple of examples of them. I've got many more. And you'll see the misalignment with the figures within the tables within those documents. But let's look at this company, Black Horse, because that's associated, isn't it? Hopefully you'll know Black Horse is associated with Lloyds Bank. And here you go, you've got Gresham Street, but a different number in Gresham Street again. Now here's what it should say on the incorporation document from 1960. Julian and Hodge Company Limited. And it's completely different. Gwent and West Finance Company Limited. You'll also see just at the bottom here, it's just to corroborate the date is, this is an interesting one actually, because it's got 1962 on the incorporation document. Now that would fit between these dates. You've got 1960, the company was created. So 1962 is between these two dates. So that had that company name between these dates, but it's not been registered again. Even though Companies House have scanned this document, put this document onto the register, that is fraud. But it's also got a stamp here, the Solicitors Law Stationery Society Limited. You'll look at my other documents and you will see that features throughout. Moving on, we've got Black Horse Group Limited, slightly different company name, linked through to the same person, 25 Gresham Street. And on here you can see it's got an address which features throughout. Fraud Cheapside and Jordan's Limited is on here as well. Okay, so now let's look at Rishi Sunak himself. So that's coming in through Infosys. Let's look at Rishi Sunak. So this is Wikipedia search showing his supposed date of birth. Now, when you search the name Rishi Sunak on Companies House, you go into the search record. Within it, put in Rishi Sunak. It brings up this record. Almost identical date of birth, but slightly different. May here, December here. One of them is incorrect, and we'll see why we believe this is Rishi Sunak as we move on. So somewhere the information has been given as fraudulent or false. Here we can see Catamaran Ventures. Now this is, I haven't got it on the articles, but that has been featured through articles or potentially linked to illegitimate activity. So we're now moving forward, and you can see this is important because we're going to do a lot of research around this company. Evelyn Partners LLP is linked to Catamaran Ventures via the Rishi Sunak, research. And we're going to research that. And you can see it goes at another address, 45 Gresham Street. So let's look into that company. This is incorporation document, 4. So we're still looking at, the incorporation now for Catamaran Ventures. And this is very important because the incorporation document for this features a company called Formations Direct Limited on it. Now that's important because that links in with previous research, which you can see here. Formations Direct links closely to Tobias Elwood, who is the Member of Parliament for Dorset that covers the area where my company is based, where I obtain the forged bank documents, okay? And you can look at the, actually I don't know if I put it in there, there is a document for Tobias Elwood, but it also links through to Rebeck Brothers, which is a real estate company in Dorset, linked to that area. Remember, my company is a real estate company, and it links to multiple other real estates that are all interlinked and intertwined, and you'll see that later. Here we go. So now we're looking at Evelyn Partners LLP, and as you recall, that was mentioned on the document on the company for linked to the search on Rishi Sunak. So we're now looking at Evelyn Partners. Now on the incorporation document, they have same address that's mentioned throughout, of Chancery Lane, but also McFarlane's LLP, which becomes relevant. So McFarlane's LLP. So now looking within Evelyn Partners, we're going into a different person record now and looking within them. And you can see that BDO LLP is in there. That features throughout the fraud. To a different person within Evelyn Partners LLP, and that links through to Grant Thornton UK LLP. Okay, you can tell because it's the same name at the top. So we've gone into the person record and they have a financial interest in this company because they're linked. Grant Thornton linked to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council document. Now I do suggest if you're going to look at any other documents first that I've created, go and look at the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council document, followed by the World Trade Centre document, because they have guides written within those documents, and you'll be able to follow the guide through the document and see the fraud, see the evidential links. And Grant Thornton linked to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, which is the area where Tobias Elwood works, where my company is based, etc. And here you can see that it links through to Stanley Davis and Hart & Co via Grant Thornton, and also to BCP Council. And that's important because they link through to the fraud all the way through. So there's all these links. And bearing in mind, I know I keep saying links, but there's over 5 million registered companies. Over 5 million. And don't forget, for all these links, there's fraud all the way through it. Very clear evidence of fraud by our very own governments. That's been going on, by the way, for absolute decades. And I believe since 1844, when Companies House was created, and I believe the whole legal system has been set up around this system of fraud and controlled through child trafficking and the fraud. And there's no doubt going to be drugs trafficking in relation to it as well. It's the root cause of most of the problems in the world, because it's linked to wars and everything. Anyway, moving on. Back into Evelyn Partners, different person record now, and it links through to Community Initiative Southwest Limited. Okay, so let's look at that company. And you'll see in a minute why we can be confident that is Rishi Sunak, even though the date of birth is different. So this company was started in 2002 in February. 2007. And it changed its name in 2008. Not very much, did it? So it's now called Community Initiative Southwest Limited. Back then it was called Community Initiative Southwest Community Interest Company. Okay, so liability is removed. But let's look at the incorporation document. And you can see Osborne Clark of 2 Temple Back East, Temple Quay, Bristol. If you look at my other documents, my other videos, you'll see that that address is absolutely key. It links through to Jordan's Limited. It links through to all of the key companies linked to all the fraud. What they're doing is centralising everything to a very small number of people through this fraudulent criminal system, which is appearing to be the World Economic Forum, which has the Rothschilds as part of it. And you'll see the Rothschilds feature throughout. Now, that's very dangerous. If you have a very small number of people that are involved in crime, don't forget this is a crime, that are in control of the world, that means the world is going to be controlled through crime. And if it's controlled through crime and potential child trafficking, we're in a very serious place. There's also a mention here, and this is quite important, of Bond Pierce LLP. Bond. Remember Bond. Same address, 3 Temple. We'll come to that in a minute. Bond. So, this is just to show that Osborne Clark links through to Louise Smith research. You can go and look at the document for Louise Smith. Louise Smith is the head of Companies House. They control all of this information. And this is just showing that this company also is linked through to Osborne Clark and Ovalsec. Sounds very computer. Now, this is important because a person within this company links through to PIE companies. PIE. If you were aware of look at the World Trade Center document, Harriet Harman was linked to PIE. I'll say no more than that. Go and look at the document, PIE. So we're now moving on to energy companies. So it's still within Evelyn Partners on the top left there. I know I'm going a bit quick, but you can look at these slowly. You're going to have the document within the file anyway, so you can research and incorporate all of this yourself. And you can see the original company was called Next Generation Group Limited. Started up in 1998, changed its name in February 2000, and again in 2006. And on their incorporation documents, you have 788 to 790 Finchley Road, and the name of Kahan. You can just see there, Keith Kahan features regularly throughout. Now that's important. Go and look at, you've also got A1 Company Services. Now if you type and search in Finchley Road fraud, you'll see a Ham and High article from 2019 that links that address to international government fraud, corrupt politicians, dictators around the world, corruption, money laundering through the taxation system, and linked to also, I've already maybe just said this, I'm talking a lot, I know, corrupt politicians. And here we are, it's linked to very important companies. And the reason being is that was an empty address. And at one point it had 260,000 companies or so linked to it. But now we've got links through to energy companies, okay? Now we all know about the climate change that the governments around the world are harping on about. Now I actually do believe that there is an element of risk, with the population as it is. But there's things that can be done to slow down, or I say control, through choice, incentivize choice, enable the control of population through choice, to ensure that the environment isn't harmed. But the trouble is, this system of fraud has gone on for so long, and of course it appears as though they've had the ability to defraud the general public through the taxation system. So more people equals more tax equals more money through the fraudulent system, and it's potential they're now panicking and considering very sinister means, which we'll come to later, to control the population. But it doesn't need to be done like that. It can be done through incentivised choice, which I'll talk about later, another time. But now we've got links through Evelyn Partners to a Dorset company. Remember, my company is based in Dorset, so we're now linking into Dorset from Evelyn Partners very quickly. And we've got a company here, a media company, that links through from Rempstone, that same Dorset company. So we've just gone into the personal records. Let's look at this media company, Kerwin. And lo and behold, Swift Incorporations and Jordan's Limited. Now, child trafficking goes hand in hand with media companies. Now, I won't explain why, but you can imagine the filming and stuff that goes on in relation to child abuse. I'm not saying this company was involved in that, but I'm just explaining the general. So here we've got another children's company linked through to it. And now we go back into Rempstone and looking at this person. So that's the Dorset company we're referring to. Now, we've already got fraud in the media company, because we've already got the connection there to Jordan's Limited, which is an illegal entity company. Should never have been trading. That was used in starting up my company as well, before I was a director. Okay, so my company was started in 2007. I was offered to become a director in 2009. I obviously presumed it was a legitimate company, so became a director, thinking that, okay, if I become part of the freehold, then my property just may increase in because it becomes more saleable, doesn't it? If you have a freehold as opposed to a leasehold, I was thinking it would be a good idea. And if you're a director, you can actually have a say over how that building is managed, which I tried to do lawfully and legitimately, but I was removed. But here we go. It connects through to the Cayman Islands. Now, the Cayman Islands is an offshore tax haven system, but it also can be used not only to avoid paying tax, but it can be used to launder money through into offshore accounts, and we'll talk about that later. And here you go, you can see Cayman Islands. And this is incredibly important. So on the same incorporation document, you have the Prince's Drawing School Company. But you've also got Ian Fleming Gildrose Publications Limited. Now this is incredibly important, because one of the shareholders with my company, called Deborah Fleming, has a husband called John Fleming, and there are links through to Ian Fleming from that company. Deborah was a former NHS chief executive officer in charge of a £700 million budget, and was connected through to Hampshire, Isle of Wight, and all the areas that we're talking about a lot. And her husband, John Fleming, was leaked information. I've got the evidence of this. It's supported by the documents. Leaked information by Dorset Police, my former police, even though I'd named them as prime suspects. And I have to disclose this now, because the government allowing no option, but I have to protect the general public from all of this, so I'm having to release this information. Now, their company is also linked to the startup of JP Morgan Banks, okay, which is linked to international banking fraud and this system of international fraud through the company's house registration system. But Ian Fleming was a former MI6 agent. Okay, so there's an MI6 connection through to all of this. So remember, there's a James Bond, okay, because Ian Fleming wrote the James Bond books. So the information suggests that I've got. So we have a connection through to James Bond, and you'll see that later. Here we've got a link on the same document to Sherborne Schools for Girls. That's a school within Dorset, and that's featured in previous documents. So now same person now links through to a what appears to be a real estate company. Again, Gresham Street, same address. On the incorporation document, Swift Incorporations on top right there. which means fraudulent entity company. And you can also see Jordan's on the right, bottom right. Sorry, I'm zooming in and making that worse. Oh. So moving forward, you can see this was incorporated in 1998, and they changed the name in 2004. But it's still active and hasn't changed its name since. Now, obviously, you had the World Trade Center disaster in 2001. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions about that. Sherborne School, here we go. Now, based in Dorset, and someone from that company, just to show the link, but then the same person going back, Simon John maybe, you can see at the top there, links through to this company. And you can see it's got a Cayman Islands, again, offshore tax haven company. And on the incorporation document, you can see Cayman, but also you can see GoldenEye Films Limited. GoldenEye Films. James Bond, if you don't know about GoldenEye was a James Bond movie. Now remember, James Bond, what do we associate James Bond with? Lasers. Freaking lasers, man. It's my cool accent. Lasers. Now that's important. You need to remember that because of the directed energy systems that we're going to be talking about later. But we'll come back to that later. So with the same person, links to now the Association of Conservatives Clubs Limited, in brackets the. So that's how we can be fairly sure that that was Rishi Sunak, but that false details have either been put on by Wikipedia or by whoever entered Rishi Sunak as a member of that company. Now we'll go on to part 2 now, because this is going to get, and believe me, it only gets more interesting as we go. So part 2 coming up on the Association of